Okay, good afternoon. I'm Assistant Sheriff Brett Zimmerman, and today I'm going to brief you on additional details as we know them today about the officer-involved shooting that occurred on December 1st, 2018. This is officer-involved shooting number 22 for the year, fatal number 12. And at the same time last year, we were at 21 total officer-involved shootings, and 10 were fatal. The date and time and type of call was on December 1st, 2018 at 7:41 a.m., and it was a vehicle stop. Location of the OIS was at 18th Street and Sunrise Avenue, which is located in the downtown area command. And you can see the overhead location from the view up top to the screen to my left. The time of the OIS where shots were fired at approximately 07:45 a.m. Our involved officer is Paul Bruning, spelled B-R-U-N-I-N-G. He's 48 years old, and he's been with LVMPD for 13 years. In this incident, Officer Bruning was armed with a Glock 22 .40 caliber handgun. The investigation revealed he fired 2 rounds. Officer Bruning is assigned to the Tourist Safety Division in the Traffic Bureau. He was wearing his body-worn camera during this incident, and it was activated. Our suspect is a Demontry Boyd. His name and picture are to my left. He's a 43-year-old black male adult, 5'11", 215 pounds. Boyd's weapons were a homemade knife and Officer Bruning's taser. Boyd's vehicle was an unregistered blue Infiniti FX35. Boyd's criminal history: he's a convicted felon for evading a police officer in 2007, California, receiving stolen property in 2007, California, taking vehicle without owner's consent in 2007, California, and carjacking in 2007, California. He has a lengthy arrest record dating back to 2000, which includes the following arrests: under the influence of a controlled substance, 2018, California; carjacking in 2018, California; assault with a firearm, 2011, California; shooting at an inhabited dwelling, 2011, California; burglary, 2011 in California; possession of a stolen vehicle, 2011 in California; felon possession of a firearm in 2006 in California; burglary in 2000, California; and numerous related traffic offenses priors locally. Boyd's charges, had he survived, would be resisting arrest with a deadly weapon and assault with a deadly weapon on a protected person, 2 counts. Details of the OIS. On Saturday, December 1st, 2018 at 7:41 a.m., Officer Bruning conducted a vehicle stop on a blue unlicensed Infiniti SUV that was driving recklessly through the neighborhood near 18th and Sunrise at a high rate of speed and failing to yield to Officer Bruning. The SUV was being driven by Boyd, and no one else was in the vehicle with him. Upon making contact with Boyd, Officer Bruning directed Boyd to turn the vehicle off and exit. Upon exiting the vehicle, Officer Bruning observed an object attached to Boyd's belt and instructed him not to reach for it. Officer Bruning requested an additional officer, and one was dispatched. Boyd ignored Bruning's commands and reached for the object that was attached to his belt. Officer Bruning immediately grabbed Boyd and attempted to place him in custody, but Boyd began fighting. Officer Bruning gave Boyd multiple commands to stop fighting and to get on the ground, but Boyd refused. Officer Bruning deployed his taser, but it was ineffective. Officer Bruning advised dispatch he had deployed his taser over the air and requested a code red at 7:43 a.m. Dispatch initiated the code red on the channel, and multiple units also responded. Officer Bruning continued issuing the verbal commands to stop, but Boyd ignored them. Boyd continued to attack Officer Bruning and gained control of the taser. The fight lasted for approximately 2 minutes. At approximately 7:45 a.m., Officer Bruning deployed his firearm, firing 2 rounds, both which struck Boyd. The first backup officer arrived as the shots were fired, and Boyd was taken into custody. Medical attention was immediately summoned for Boyd. Paramedics transported Boyd to UMC Trauma, where he was pronounced deceased. The investigation conducted by our force investigation team revealed Boyd was in possession of a knife that was inside what appeared to be a homemade makeshift sheath. Boyd stated to Officer Bruning at the time he exited the vehicle that it was a battery pack. There it's pictured to my left on the screen. The knife is the object that was on Boyd's belt that he was reaching for when Officer Bruning at first went hands-on. I will now show you footage from Officer Bruning's body-worn camera. And again, the sound on this will kick in about 30 seconds in because that's how our body-worn cameras operate. And there you see the vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed and Officer Bruning having to catch up to it, driven through those residential neighborhoods down off 18th and Sunrise.
See your hands. Show me your hands. Both of them. Keep them right there. Tom 241, 467.
Tom 241, go ahead.
A non-registered blue Infiniti SUV occupied one time. We're at Sunrise in 18. Whose car is this? You always drive it like that? I asked you to shut it off, okay? Shut it off. Shut it off. Step out.
Charlie 45, I'm calling for, thank you. Charlie 45.
Come on back here. Yeah, leave all that stuff. Walk back here. Why are you being stopped? Because you're driving recklessly. So get out of the car and come back here with me. Come on back here with me. No, I want you to keep your hands out of your pockets and do what I'm telling you to do, which is walk back here.
Sir, why do?
Tom 241, give me another unit. No, I want you to keep your hands out of your pockets and walk back here. Okay? Walk back. So far. Walk back here. What's that on your hip? Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. What is it?
It's a battery.
Don't touch it.
I touch it.
Turn.
What are you doing?
I'm gonna arrest you. Get down on the ground. Get down on the ground. Throw me. Don't you fucking do it.
Do what?
Get down on the ground. Sir. Taser, Boyd, code red. Get your hands out of your pockets. Get down on the ground. Negative. Get down on the ground. Don't you dare. Dude, I'm gonna shoot you. I'm gonna shoot you. Big ass. 241 shots fired. Affirmative medical.
in a 30-second interval, the suspect gets back out from under that car and says it's on now. He had a battery pack or something. He said it was a battery pack on his waist. It turned out to be a knife. Unsafe to approach the car there, waiting for his backup. The suspect then charges him again from under the vehicle. So the officer did take steps to try and de-escalate this situation before he had to use deadly force on the suspect. The next video we're showing, this is surveillance video from the residence. This one will be real time. We have it framed, and you can actually see the tail end. This tree right here shades most of it, but you can see the tail end of the officer trying to keep his foot on top of the taser when the suspect is trying to grab for it, but you're able to see put the pieces together from what's missing from the body-worn camera due to the camera being knocked around during the fight. And as you can see in this video too, the suspect was reaching around his waistband where the officer had first noticed that leather sheath or whatever it was. And during the struggle, the taser was disarmed. The officer was disarmed during the struggle as they were fighting over the taser. And again, this is slowed down frame by frame, this last one, where you'll be able to see it in slow motion. Okay, I'll now open it up for any questions anybody has.
Did Boyd ever use that homemade knife on the officer?
No, he was unable to during the struggle. When I arrived on the scene, it was on the ground in the street, but at no point that's what keyed the officer in on the situation, was he kept trying to reach for that item. The officer told him numerous times, as you can see on the body-worn camera, don't touch it. So the officer's sense went off that there was some sort of danger with that thing, and in the end, he was right. His senses were right. There was a knife in there. Yes, sir.
Was the officer injured, and can you walk us from what you know through what kind of fight it was? Was it a fist fight?
It looked to me, in interviewing the officer, in the officer's walkthrough, and also looking at the body-worn camera, mainly he tried to, obviously you saw them go hands-on at first. He deployed the taser like he should have to de-escalate it. He fired the taser. The taser was ineffective because of the amount of clothing that Boyd was wearing, and the taser probes were inside his clothing. So we don't know, obviously at any point, we feel the taser's ineffective when you're wearing heavy clothing, but we teach our officers to go with a force continuum. You start off with presence, you move on to verbal commands, and you elevate the force as you see fit in a situation on how to gain a subject under control. But from what I saw from that video, it was a close quarter fight of him trying to at least gain control of the suspect and hold him down or restrain him until other officers arrived. That's why initially he requested backup. or he knew once he saw it going downhill, he requested backup. That's how we're trained. Wait for other cops to get there and try and take him into custody. Last thing I'll leave it with is, as you can see, Boyd had the opportunity to fight or flight. He had the opportunity to give up. He had the opportunity to flee if he wanted to, but instead he charged right at our officer from under that car again to engage in a fight.
Does he know where that second object was throughout the whole struggle?
They were both of those objects were in the close proximity of where the officer's motorcycle was, right where the struggle was. Both of those objects wound up on the ground, probably within the taser, probably within, we're talking maybe a 10 by 10 foot area of where that entire struggle was. Everything was on the ground there, and at some point they were dropped during the struggle.
Is there a concern with the taser? I've been to the past 2 or 3 officer-involved shooting news conferences, and it seems like the taser has not worked.
Under a circumstance like this, we have different tools on our belt. The officer realized, we may say it's ineffective, but I don't know if our officer out there at the scene realizes that it's ineffective at the time, considering that Boyd is under the vehicle. I mean, he's laying under the vehicle for 15 or 30 seconds. The officer's trying to reassess, but in looking at our tasers, when they're cared for properly, this one was charged properly. It's just, we know going in that if somebody's wearing a large amount, the subject wasn't wearing a large amount of clothing, but clothing could stop the probes from going in, and then you're trained to go to a different tool. You may use an impact tool, you may use your capstun, but under a circumstance like this where it's a close quarter fight, fist fight, it's very hard to get to those tools. And once the officer realizes the subject may have a knife, now he's trying to grab a hold of the taser, at that point he utilized deadly force.
Do we know what Boyd, how he used these objects before?
No, we do not. We know that Boyd was attempting to had the taser from the officer during the struggle. So the assumption could have been made, the officer's assumption could have been that the taser was going to be used upon him in that struggle. And also the knife, unknown, the knife dropped during that struggle. But like I said, the officer felt that there was a weapon in there because he kept trying to reach for it.
But as far as like how he's ever used that homemade knife before?
We don't, yeah, no. And they were supposed to interview his family in the next few days because they were out of state. But yeah, we don't know any of his prior. He does obviously have a violent prior history, carjackings and things, but we don't have any idea where that knife or how it was utilized prior.
Was this car that he was using when stolen?
No, it was he was staying in town here with a relative, and it was his relative's vehicle that he obtained to borrow that morning or night.
So he's not a resident from
He's from out of state, but he was staying here. I don't know his whereabouts, but he was here for a period of time prior to this. Yes, sir.
Went underneath the car?
No idea. No idea.
What was the distance of the traffic from when the traffic stop began or when the officer spotted the suspect?
The distance that was driven?
Uh-huh.
That I don't know. I know the officer was finishing up a wreck in that area. Our officers work down in that area too because it's a violent crime area. It's one of our consistent hotspots that we want to reduce crime in. And I don't know the distance, but on the initial body-worn camera footage, you do see him zigzagging, trying to catch up to him, and you may be able to piece it together. It does look like it was a good 2 or 3 blocks that he was trying to catch up to him before he came to that stop at Sunrise and 18th.
It's rare for a traffic stop to traffic officer to be involved in one of these, right?
Yeah, we have that discussion all the time that, we tell the media and the public that there's no routine traffic stop or nothing's routine in our line of work. And every stop, we're lucky that we don't have many like this, but a routine traffic stop of someone driving recklessly could end in this. And that's why we train and we give the officers the tools and the training to do their jobs each day to keep them safe.
Has Officer Bruning ever been involved in another?
No, he had no prior officer involved shootings.
To clarify, the reckless driving that Boyd was doing, was that just speeding or was he like zigzagging around the road?
He told us it was reckless driving. What the definition of reckless driving is usually 2-3 violations on one. If you, as an officer, if you're observing 2 or 3 violations, they're speeding, they're lane changing, they're cutting off, there's a whole variation, but he probably observed what he meant was reckless driving, where you have multiple violations while you're following that vehicle and you observe, you know, the turns or whatever that vehicle is doing, and that's how he described it.
Was Boyd under any kind of influence?
We don't know at this time, and his toxicology is not back yet.
Do you know if Boyd had any outstanding warrants, or was he on probation? It's not like he got caught.
Yeah, I do know. What I do know locally is they said he had been arrested for traffic warrants prior here, misdemeanor traffic warrants, and that's all we had on him. So nothing was outstanding at the time, but he had a prior arrest here for he had traffic warrants somehow here, and that was his only contact with us. Okay, thank you all for coming.